And just introducing myself, I'm Andrew Stuck from Walk, Listen, Create, and we're really delighted to have Eléonore Ozanne back. She was a guest at a previous cafe last year, and so that people wouldn't get bored of me, and she wouldn't be rehearsed in knowing what to answer. We recruited Ellie Rycroft to host this event. So I'm going to disappear very quickly and go out of the scene and let people in as they come and that sort of thing, and leave it in the good hands of Ellie and Eleanor. But first of all, I have to thank the EU Create program and acknowledge their funding for this event. That's how it's been made to be a free event, and they're funding the part funding, not entirely funding it, part funding the Walking Arts and Local Communities project. So I'm going to jump ship. Ellie, over to you.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm really delighted to be hosting Eleonore today. So having seen the last Walking Cafe with Claire Corman, and now I'm in the enviable position of now taking over on this hosting job. Eléonore Ozanne is an artist and researcher based between Seville, Bilbao, and Po. An artist and researcher, her interdisciplinary work examines the relationship between the body and the boundaries of everyday spaces. Through a practice of displacement, Ozanne investigates the concept of frontiers, both as physical limits and invisible walls that we navigate in daily life. And we've kind of been put together because we've been approaching night walks and night walking from quite distinct places in a way. Eleonore is an artist as well as a researcher, but me as a historian and much more of an academic. I'm an associate professor in early modern performance at University of Bristol. But we've had some really wonderful conversations where we found these points of connection between the types of practices that we're involved in, and hopefully we can elucidate some of those this evening for you. So what we're going to do is bring our work more into dialogue with each other. Eleonore, shall I hand over to you by sharing the slides?
So first of all, I'm so happy to be here and to see some faces that I know from last year prep. And I wanted to start with something soft as night. Not an explanation or theory that we're going to approach later on, but just a feeling, the one that brought us together when we first imagined this talk, and a desire to take up space and to share the night, to turn fear into presence and loneliness into a constellation. A wormhole, as we will talk about later on. And yes, there's something about the night, its silence and all the particular sounds, the way our body adjusts. The night activated something else, a different rhythm and a different way of sense. And maybe that's how we begin to build our adapted night selves. So today, Ellie and me, we will be sharing different ways of combining arts and essentially performance art and walking art with night walks among women. Eleanor will talk about a woman midnight walk at the University of Bristol, and I will take you to the heart of the project Women Walking the City by Night. But before of that, we wanted to take you through some historical and artistic paths that have nourished and inspired our ideas.
So I wanted to introduce walking from an early modern perspective, and we're going to be talking quite a lot about histories and repeating and repetition, ritual and turning during this talk. But one of the reasons why I'm very interested in early modern views of walking is because they believe that through walking, you renew and regenerate the self. And Elaine McKay talks about this in this particular article, where she says, by participating in recreational activities, people undergo something of a transformation. People undergo a physical, mental, or spiritual renewal, which not only incorporates a reconstitution of health, but also offers the opportunities to regenerate or recreate a sense of themselves as individual and unique personalities. So in terms of how early moderns thought about walking as recreation, the emphasis is kind of pushed onto that second part of the word, creation. And what's kind of significant about it is that it has a much more capacious sense of recreation than we might think of in terms of fun or even health. This is about renewal and regeneration. It's far more profound. So she goes on to say, underneath pleasure, recreation has a function which is related to physical and mental health and the ways in which we form our individual personalities. And this is the bit that interests me, organize society and form a collective national consciousness. It's a constant regeneration of individual and collective identities. It's how we view ourselves and project to others that sense of identity on both a one-to-one basis and on a more general level. So my work is kind of interested in how we can learn from early modern views on walking, how we can sort of bring those more profound, more more generative senses of walking into our present, to think about how we can use it, not just to renew ourselves as individuals, but to think about walking in new ways that create new types of society, new types of groupings. So that's linked to night walking specifically, because in the early modern period, night walking shifts from being something that's in the 16th century associated with often male criminality. And then in the early 17th century, it kind of gets put onto women. Women become night walkers. So Paul Griffiths writes in this 1998 article that night walking communicated issues that were of essential concern to the ordering of early modern society. These included the regulation of sexuality, the policing of women, the ordering of time, and the specific disorders that were associated with the darkness and the fall of night. And in London, which is where he centers his study, he says night walkers were commonly imagined as lewd women, enticers of youth, and other people to lewdness in the evening. Decker's inquisitor in Lantern and Candlelight, 1608, asked questions of women walking late. Where have you been so late? Are you married? What's your husband? Where lie you? So suddenly, around the early 17th century, women's bodies become more surveilled as night walkers. And that's a shift that really interested me, how that might be and why that might be happening.
So I was wondering, I think I told that last time, but I will repeat myself. The first time I wondered about night walking was with the prohibition of night walking through the COVID-21. So we couldn't go in the streets at night. And I started to read about night walk artists, and especially Francesco Carreri. And his book is wonderful. All his books are wonderful, but I always felt out of the thing that he was talking about, because he was always talking about men's body. So I started to wonder who worked with who were the famous artists that were walking with that were working with walk art. Can you pass? So like we would all say Richard Long, Hamish Fulton, and Frances Alice. This a particular performance marked me, because it's I don't know if you know it. It's called Narcoturismo, and during 1 week, Alice visits Copenhagen with different drugs. So you can see on day 7 he was on speed, on day 9 he was on cocaine, etc., etc. And I wonder, could we do that? Would our body, would the performance say the same thing? Could we, and who could? Because I'm not sure it's only, like, I'm sure it is not only a gender thing. It is much more intersectional. And so I tried to find female reference on night walking. And of course, one of my great reference is Esther Ferrer. And I start wondering, what does mean walking? And she has this wonderful piece of corporal actions, where she starts to I don't know how to say, to take the measure of everything through her body. And I felt, when I saw this performance, it was so different from narcoturismo that I wondered what are the spaces where normally we are expected to be or not. And I'm saying that knowing that this is a typical performance of the 1960, but it is not so long ago. Can we change, please?
Mm-hmm.
Then I wondered, what did walking meant, and particularly with memory. There are a lot of women working with memory and walking, and here I wanted to show and to have with us Zineb Zedira, with the Earth of My Father, where she decided to walk on all the land of her father in Algeria, and it is like a generational path from her father to herself. And she never say the number of path that she took, but it was part of the performance counting. Can you press? Then here it's a performance from Pilar Albarracin, in which I've participated several times, and it consists of putting the typical flamenco dress of Andalusia, and to walk for a big trajectory until arriving in a specific place where there was a lot of Spanish immigration. Like here, it is in the Musée Picasso of Paris, but it was made also in Madrid, in the north of France, and different places. Knowing that in Andalusia, 50 years ago, half of the population had to immigrate because of poverty, political issue, etc. But walking for me, well, in all the other pieces, it is very political. But I couldn't not have with us Emily Jassir with this piece called "Where We Come From." She used her American, I think it's American passport, to be able to go to Palestine Palestine and make the wish of a person that couldn't enter back into Palestine. So one of these wishes was, please go and play on football with my friends, or please give a hug to my mother, etc., etc. There are very different ways of walking and different skills. But the examples that I've shared aren't exhaustive. They come from my personal interests and artists that I wanted to be with us tonight, for us to talk about what is walking, what is scale, what is walking alone or walking in community, day and night, etc., etc. There are, of course, many incredible women walking day and night, and the Walk, Listen, Create project is the best example of it. Because yes, walking is an artistic practice. It is a way to measure, to inhabit, and to exist. That's how actually Ellie and I met, through our shared walking practice. And even if we walk in different places in different way, we have both chosen to join this way of communicating and of working. And we both did this in collectivity.
Thank you so much. Actually, before we move on to my night walk, what you said then about how bodies take up space when they're walking, I just think that's really interesting, and particularly that piece of the woman walking up and down, in terms of, you know, whose body gets to measure, whose is this ideal normative body that serves as a unit of measurement as well. And there's some very interesting stuff we're hopefully going to explore about how women's bodies kind of get bigger and smaller, bigger by night or smaller by night, depending on how they are reacting to that nighttime environment. But it also really reminded me of, when you look at travel literature from the 1600s, the people who were going over and plundering and colonizing lands, they often use their bodies to measure it. So you will have, you know, some explorer, would-be colonizer, using their body to say 16 paces this way, you know, we have a lovely grove of trees. 30 paces over here, you'll find a beach, you're going to find plenty, but they're measuring this land that's to be plundered for resources through their bodies. So that's another way in which we're kind of walking back against those violent and harmful practices of walking as measurement and scale.
And I feel it's still very present, even if in our way of talking. For example, in France, during a lot of time, we used to count on our hand and our feet. And this is why we say for 80, we say 4 times 4. Because we counted on feet and hands. So I think it is the body is very very important, and language tells us a lot of everything. That's well, it's a way of seeing our reality.
Thanks, Eleonore. So I'm going to talk about the night walk that we did at Bristol. This was in 2022, and we've got some more planned this coming year, because I've got some British Academy funding to write a monograph about early modern walking, but also to do some night walks and produce some soundscapes as part of that. But this one we did with a women's walking group called Bristol Stepping Sisters, who during the pandemic were set up under Sophie Brown, who realized that there weren't really many Black women's walking groups in the city, and it just took off. It just flew. There were so many women of color wanting to walk collectively. This is the first time we did something by night, and yeah, it was we chose the area of Clifton Downs for various reasons. One of them was that it had woods, and we wanted to walk in woods. We felt that that was something that we were really disallowed from doing. At night, you're not allowed to walk through woods. You might have reservations about it in the day, let alone at night. So we wanted to do that because we could. And then also we walked in Clifton Downs because this is an area of Bristol which is traditionally very wealthy, very white. It's associated with promenaders by day, but it also has this kind of other side of it where it's associated with sex work by night. So it's a kind of dualistic space. And yeah, one of the ironies of the space in a way is that it was given to all Bristolians for hereafter and evermore by an act of parliament in the 1860s, I think. And the women, when I told them that, were really surprised because I don't think they felt that it belonged to them, but it supposedly belongs to all Bristolians. So we reoccupied it by night, and it was a political act as well of women of color occupying this space that not consistently but kind of historically and traditionally has been whitewashed. So that was the kind of thinking behind it. We also managed to produce this lovely soundscape which you can access on the website, where we asked women some questions about night walking. And what was really telling was that we said to them, we asked them one question where we said, would you walk by night again? You know, are you enjoying this? And they're like, oh yeah, it's so lovely. It's really nice to be out at this time of night. The air is really cool. It's really refreshing. It's lovely to be with all these women. And then we said, would you walk on your own at night? And every single one said, no, of course not. So it's almost like this is the only way that the women that we were walking with felt safe was to walk together. This is a really long quote, so I'm not going to read it all out, but somebody who became really influential in my thinking around this was the anthropologist Tim Ingold. And he writes about how we need to think about the ground as a more dynamic surface than we do. He says that we engage in what he calls a stratigraphic thinking, where we think about the land as layers that stack upon each other. You know, one generation is buried, then the next generation, then the next generation. But he has this idea of the turning of the soil, where what's buried doesn't stay buried, it comes back up. And what's current sinks down, you know, what's contemporary sinks down. So it has this much more kind of, dynamic surface of the ground. And I just found that really, really inspiring to think about bringing early modern ideas of walking into the present, but also how we kind of deal with history and histories of walking. And something that really then started to interest me was I started to think about worms as these, it's a nice little worm in the corner there, but as these inhabitants of the soil, but as inhabitants that tunnel from the surface to the depths, who knows where a worm goes, in ways that undo that stratigraphic thinking about the surface. And then I got really interested in this idea of wormholes, because wormholes connect disparate points in time and space. And what's really beautiful is that those are some, we don't know what a wormhole looks like, but they might look like something on the right. But there's also these walkways called hollowways, which are these ancient paths tunneled into the ground over centuries. And they look like wormholes to me, or how we might imagine wormholes. And then I started to think about the night walk that we did as a type of wormhole. So we started off at a toilet that was a gay cruising ground in the 1930s. And then we walked down a road that was associated with sex work from at least the 1860s through to the Second World War. And then we kind of went through the woods and past a gorge which had been formed in the Ice Age. And then we walked back through the downs, which have been given to Bristolians for hereafter evermore since the 1860s, but which also tragically have been the site of a number of attacks on women. So we were occupying space that has been the site of sexual assaults of women. And what we were doing now I kind of think about it is we were creating our own walking wormhole. We were walking through time as we were walking through space. We were re-invoking or reactivating these latent meanings that were in the soil through the process of walking. Great. I'll hand it back to Eleonore.
So the project Women Walking the City at Night started 4 years ago with a very simple idea. What if we walk at night, not alone, but together? And in order to make it be a real drift, we could follow the path of the full moon. And this is how we started. Since I already presented the project like within a sense like I don't know how you say it, from the senses last year, and the video is now on YouTube. I didn't want to repeat the same thing, so today I will share you the project in the practice, and then we can open a dialogue, because I'm interested in all of us to be able to debate or to talk about how do you see and feel it. So Women Walking the City at Night is not a performance to be watched. It's something that you join. It's not a choreography. There are no fixed routes. And each year, on the night of the harvest moon, normally it's the first moon of September, but this year it will be the full moon of October, the 6th. We meet at a point of the city and start walking in the direction of the full moon. The first walk took place in Seville. The second time we make it happen in 10 different cities of Spain. And last year we made it in 10 different countries, from Australia to Mexico. It was almost 24 hours of walking. It was beautiful, but also for me a little overwhelmed because of the organization. And so I decided to make some little change on the organization, but maybe we could talk about it a little later. How does it work? Usually I have a contact person in each city, and I ask her when the day comes up, and all the women are gathered in the gathered place. I ask this person to read a short text at the beginning. It's for it to frame the action. Then we take a photo, and from there, then we start to walk. In this action, there are no time restriction. Women can join and leave at any moment. The walks end whenever no one wants to continue, or when there are only 4 women left. It is my proper decision, but I felt like for 4 women, it was not so impressive for us to be a group. But some women told me that they continued a little bit, even though it was not into the group of 5. Afterwards, either on the way home or a few days later, I invite participants to share something with me, a short video, a message, audio of WhatsApp, anything that they feel like sharing. And slowly, years after year, these fragments come together and make a common story. It is very special for me, because it is a common story where made of very particular differences of body, as we were talking before, we were saying before, but differences of way of feeling the night, with or without fear. The age is very important. The place where you come from is very important. The place where you're walking is also important. So all of this is becoming a beautiful archive of walking, gathering once a year to walk, heading the full moon. And yeah, so as I told you last year, I wasn't so satisfied about myself in the way of how I managed the edition. Most of it because I felt a little overwhelmed with the organization. I felt that I've met through the cafe also as so much fantastic person. But it was a little late for us to organize, and I really understood that organizing well our action is also caring on the other person and on the participant that are taking the walk with us. So I was really asking myself if sharing this with you or not, but as I think that it is important to talk in the action, I also think it is important to talk of and about the action. So I wanted to open this the debate with this question: what is caring when we are talking alone, when we are walking alone at night?
Yeah, and we spoke about this a bit, didn't we? Because as I led up to my night walk, I felt so trepidatious in the course of the day. I was very serious and quiet that day because I suddenly felt that I was potentially putting these women in danger or into something that was unknown. And I suddenly felt a huge responsibility for whatever might happen, and had we prepared enough for it, and were we ready with whatever might happen. And luckily nothing did, but I completely understand your point of making sure that you can organize it as tightly as possible against any eventualities as a form of care for these women that you're taking out.
So this year the event will take place on October 6th, and of course, if it resonates with you, you're very, very welcome.
I love this idea as well of a common story, because when we did our night walks, they weren't the same stories, but what I noticed was that these stories were tumbling out of the women, and that there was some kind of release happening, and they were revisiting things, or things were occurring to them that might not have occurred to them if they were walking in the day. And as a follow-up to the night walk, I work with a company called Breathing Fire Theatre Companies, and we decided to really listen to women's stories about walking and to take them seriously. So we ran some drama workshops during International Women's Day and with community groups. And what we found was that there is a commonness. There are shared common experiences of women in terms of night walking that we do need to listen to, which are quite universal. There's also a lot of particularity and intersectionality that we need to be aware of. But in terms of this kind of common story, you can also see it operating historically, and these same kinds of themes emerge. So again, this turning of the soil, this spiraling of time, and walking as a form of time travel. Yeah. Yes,
for me, it was when we talked about this, it was very interesting because the first year, some of some woman wrote me saying, "Oh, please, I cannot walk with you, but how can I participate?" And I said to them, "Well, if you want, you can send me a message of how do you feel when you're walking at night." And the message were so hard and really, really hard that I actually questioned myself. It wasn't that I couldn't hear these hard message. We're all aware of how we have to adapt ourselves at night, but it was like, what am I performing? What am I generating as saying again and again only the negative things? And so suddenly I can feel that the woman, and I could really see the difference between the woman that had made the performance, the action with us. The testimony were not coming from there. They were coming from a change of state, a possibility for us to be able to walk at night. And of course, all of the rest and the exceptionality of this night is, well, it is not because of the proposal. It is because we are doing something that has no sense. Following the full moon is very complicated in the city because the paths are not adapted to it. But also, it is a way to be together, and it is special because we can talk about difficult things, but we are proposing something else. And for me, the common story also come from there. But it is true that I really had to, talking about the wormholes, I really had to adapt the action to every places. For example, in Edinburgh, because normally we meet at 9 o'clock at night, and in Edinburgh they asked me, please, could we meet at 8, because 9 is very, very late for us. I'm living in south of Spain. It is 40 degrees. So for us it is very early. 9 is very early, because but it tells us all the difference that we are living. It also, I also asked myself, because a woman from Ghana asked me, but she told me, she asked me if I could help her with a little bit of money for them to be able to ask to somebody to take care of the children's are okay in the night walk, but I guess they didn't want to take them with her, and it's also made me ask, oh, so what does it mean to walk at night, being a mother, being in a different situation or places? Oh, last year I walked from Mexico, and it was a place, a complicated place 10 years ago, where nobody could walk at night, nobody in general. So being woman was less, but this last year we could walk, and it was a very, very pretty walk. But I was very impressed to see the reaction of the women that were crossing us. They were like, the body was so specially positioned and going very, very fast, and it wasn't something that I had lived in being in Europe.
Fascinating. I think there was one kind of, we're going to show a slide of some keywords and some key terms that we think might be good for the debate. But I think one thing we just wanted to flag up here in the centre is this idea of adapted night selves, and adaptation has come up quite a few times already in the conversation. But what I was quite interested in when I was talking to the women in the drama workshops is how they behave differently when they're on their own at night. And there was something then again about scale. So whether they're walking, like you said, very small, hunched quickly, trying to get through it as quickly as possible, or another option seemed to be kind of masculinizing themselves. So replacing feminine shoes with trainers, putting a hoodie on and moving differently, trying to be bigger. And they called it, a couple of them said, I've got a night walk. It's different. The way that I walk at night is different to the way that I walk in the day. And it's something about taking up more space, hiding your hair. So yeah, I think that's pretty interesting as well. Again, on the negative side, but it'd be lovely to see how these night walks can produce positive night selves as well.
But of course, and it happens, and a lot of testimony told me that when they were in the path walking through the moon until the moon, they felt like safe without, well, it depended on the places, but they felt in the group. But then when they were going back home, everything changed. So of course it is still there, and there are a lot of women that are going out from the drift earlier, because we are going from to a I sorry again start again my sentence. There are a lot of women that has to go out of the path, because we're going in the opposite direction of their house, and they have no way to go back, and so they will walk alone a lot. So this also make us, well, I was also thinking of a lot about how the going back home is very important, to go to a place, to the accessibility of the place.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I think maybe should we sort of open this out now to everybody who's listening, to see if they've got any thoughts about some of these areas, such as night selves and safety and ritual. By ritual, I think we meant the repetition. So for Eleonore, the repetition of the night walk over years, but also over the course of a single day, or a single night, where women are walking, for nearly 24 hours. Yeah.
And also there are here present a different person that participated last year, so please.
Fantastic. Okay, is there anybody who wants to dive in with any questions or thoughts or responses?
Yeah, I'd like to say I loved the interconnections that you just shared between the kind of art histories and historical connections, and kind of thinking about Earth as well as that kind of connector. It's definitely not a question, just to like, oh, really enjoy it, like just an enjoyment of the kind of resonances coming through there. So thank you both for like weaving those together. I guess one thing that maybe strikes me is thinking about your research, Eleanor, in the early modern period, is like, how, like, is this like a broken record? Like when will we be free? Like when
Yeah.
will it ever change? And
Yeah.
I suppose obviously things have, in parts of the world, in some of the parts of the world that we're speaking from, or that you're speaking from right now, I don't know where everybody is right now on the call, then maybe like there are some positive changes, and we can talk about how often fear is distorted. For example, for women in the UK walking at night, you're much more likely statistically to be violently assaulted in your own home than you are on the streets, and that actually statistically nighttime is very safe, and especially walking in rural places like the woods at night is actually exceptionally safe, even though our imaginations, and I think that is very culturally influenced, that like idea of the night and the sinister tone to it. But then on the other hand, there are many parts of the world where it is actually genuinely completely unsafe for women, or even for anybody to walk. I was talking recently to a colleague who's from South Africa, who was talking about the absolute unsafety of walking, or thinking about artists like Kubra Khademi, the Afghan artist who fled after her walking performance in called Armor, when she was basically is in exile now. And yes, sorry, loads and loads of things there, but you get my drift, maybe.
Yeah, there's so much there. I mean, yeah. Where do I start? So it did, these projects did come out of the fact that I was so dispirited by reading accounts of 16th century women walking and thinking nothing's changed, how depressing. And that kind of forced me out of my 16th century cul-de-sac and into thinking about contemporary walking, and that's where a lot of these projects have come from. And when we say to women in the workshops what would change, what can change, I know a single night walk is not going to change this systemic violence against women, but it's a way of dreaming about alternatives together, and that's what I think's quite beautiful about this walking of women together. But also, when we asked women about it, they said education. So another thing that we'll be doing in the last year is piloting workshops about this issue in secondary schools, with year sevens, because we were like, there seems to be this moment around sort of 12, 11, 12, where girls' worlds start closing down at the same time as boys' worlds start opening up. So it seemed to be, somewhere where we might be able to do an intervention and speak to them about this issue. So yeah, that's one way that we're trying to tackle it, but it's such a multifaceted issue that, yeah, it's going to take a huge change.
Yes, but I also think that that maybe the fact that we are all together trying to do it will end normalizing it. I'm not sure that this normalized that it was in the 16th centuries such normalized practice. I'm not sure, and I feel that now maybe we're more cohabited from fear, but it is a little bit more normalized. I'm not sure. And then it was very interesting for me when the project started, because a lot of men asked me to do the same thing for men, and some women asked me to invite men, and some men asked me, please do another one for everybody, because we are afraid of night. And I am no expert to have an opinion to know if it is showing a change of the society. I don't know, and I think it's really different from a country to another. I remember arriving to Spain for the first time, was 20 years old, and feel for the first time not being afraid at night, because night is lived differently in Spain and then in France. So it is cultural, it is temporal, and it is very, and it is intersectional about our own and proper identity, but we can do something. Please don't desperate.
Got any other thoughts?
Yeah, hi. I'd also
Hi.
like to chip in with my thoughts. because well, thank you very much. I've listened to this project like last year, and I'm happy to keep up with it and see how you're proceeding with it. And I'm also having these questions like that you're posing, in the sense of okay, we meet at that place, but then everybody needs to go back home. How do these people go back home after all? And that is actually something that when we try to do some activist actions, it has turned out to create issues, or we try to find money for cabs, or we have like cars there, and then we just distribute the people back to their homes. So that's also something interesting. And I want to say that talking on the cultural aspect, it's also interesting. It's not because it's not only about walking at night, it's also night versus darkness, because I don't know how far north has anybody lived, but if you go to the Nordics, for example, in the summertime, there is no darkness, but there is the night. And the sense of fear is changing dramatically. Like it can still be 2 a.m. and you're walking and the roads are empty. So, you know, you still don't have like this social interaction, but you can see. And it's this that we rely so much on our sense of vision to be able to feel safe. But in reality, it's as unsafe as it was in the wintertime when it goes dark at 3 p.m., for example. And it's just darkness, it's not night. So that is also something that I found interesting in my experience as a woman from the Mediterranean moving back to moving up. To the Nordics. And there's a lot to dig in with the questions also about genders and who feels more unsafe. It's definitely a very subjective experience, and it constantly changes. But yeah, I believe that we should have more of that, no matter if it will lead to some direct result right now, especially taking it into schools. That's also important. Boys tend to spend more time in larger groups, like with even like playing football outside. Like that's a thing they do in the neighborhoods. And it's just there are like 10 of them, and they already feel a sense of safety within their community. But for us, it tends to be more individualized, and that's also where sense of vulnerability is getting heightened. So I think that if we foster the sense of community in girls as well in these ages, as you're mentioning, that is the change, it may create some kind of impact. I do think that, yeah, in the long run. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you. Yes, actually, the question of night and darkness was what made me choose this full moon, the night of the full moon, because if there are no clouds, normally it is the brightest moon of all year. But it is true that it depends on where we're walking from, but it is true that the first time I was very surprised, because I had a very poetic image in my head of all the women walking in the dark, looking at the full moon. And it was not dark at all, because there was a lot of light from the streets. So it was a visual surprise for me, because I thought the only light would be coming from the full moon. And it is true, the sky was very, very light, but it wasn't the case. It was our streets were very well illuminated. But it is true that when you're walking in a direction that is it is not logical, because the moon has nothing. It seems that the moon that has nothing to do with urbanistic planning. We arrived, for example, in some group arrived in a train rail station, so they couldn't go further. In one of the paths that we've done, we arrived on a very big highway, and we didn't want to cross. And the light change, and when you start to go out of the city, it is way, way darker. But there are groups that also made this action through the forest, and I feel that from the testimony, I feel that the light of the moon was way more important in this case. And then it is true that in the first action that we've made, I was wondering if it would be a good idea for us to think about a taxi or something like that, for us to go back home. But I decided not to do it. I decided not to do it that way, because I feel that this, one of the important thing of a woman walking the city at night is the sense of community, but not only the sense of community when we are walking in our group, but the sense of community of all of us walking all over the world. So sometimes some of the women come and walk 5 minutes, but they are connected with others that are walking 5 minutes also. So I feel maybe it's it's a very dreamy way of seeing the action, but I feel that as the meeting point change every year, I hope one year the person that had to go back home earlier could walk during more time. But I also hope that if this person walked 5 minutes, that she could feel in this 5 minutes the importance of her presence into the community of all of us walking during 24 hours throughout the same direction.
I'd see that again through the kind of model of the wormhole, which is connecting these women through at different points of time and space together, because you're all doing the same sort of walk. Yeah, I was going to say something else. Oh, this is just picking up on that idea of ordering of time, which Paul Griffiths mentioned. So it's really surprising how many of the categories that we live by today were, there's a reason why it's called early modern, because lots of ideas were set up then which still reverberate through how we live. But Todd Borlick calls a process that happened in the early 17th century, he calls it nocturnalization, which is where suddenly there's a mandated use of light after a certain point. I think it's 9 p.m. And that kind of creates, this is nighttime now. And that's kind of through, a use of artificial light. And I think you had to hang something outside your door at a certain point. So this is this kind of, trying to set up who's allowed where and when and in what way, who's allowed to take up space. If you're out in the dark or out when the lights are hung up, then there's something potentially deviant or disturbing about your movement. So I wanted to add that in.
Hello.
Hi.
I've got a question. Obviously, both of you have spent time walking during the day and during the night. And I was wondering if you compare the two in your mind, did you notice a change in the conversations between day and night walking groups, like in the topics, tones, frequencies, volumes, nuances, silences, or intimacies, or anything?
So I think one of the things that interests me about walking anyway is that you're often walking side by side with people, unlike in a conversation where you're facing people. And that sort of spatialization of the relationship enables people to talk more freely sometimes when they're not looking at somebody directly. So I think walking generally in the daytime serves that kind of function, but I found it to be exacerbated by night. I found that freedom to reveal stuff that you were thinking and feeling and that had happened was more marked at night myself. How about you, Eleonore?
Yes, for me, there's a very clear difference. There are two different contexts. One is one when I am walking alone, or when I'm walking out of women walking the city at night. And then there is the action, the performance once a year. And I think as for women walking the city at night, we are into a very specific place and moment. The conversation are different because of the little text that we are reading at the beginning, that is like setting the why and how we are doing it, and because we are walking with a lot of time with with women that we don't know, and it is not so much the case when I'm walking at night, but more ahead of that, I think that yes, the night makes the senses more alert. We are more attentive, like our eyes try to be more attentive because we see less, because we see less things. We are more attentive to movement, to sound. So yes, I think senses are very, very different. And I feel that the conversation in Women Walking the City at Night are sometimes very current. You see current? You say, is it like a very like to know each other, because there's a lot of women that don't know each other, and other are really directed to why are we here, and why do we want to be here, and how does it change the fact that we are not alone doing this.
I went on a night walk recently where we were asked to be quiet during the walk, and we were just told it's a quiet walk. I found that really difficult, actually, because I wanted to talk and connect with the women. But absolutely, I mean, it was a really beautiful moon that night. Oh my God, it was so bright and so round, and it was, yeah, it was a case of connecting with the environment really differently. And it was nice to not have to fill the space with talk either, you know, to be free from that social you know, the pressure to kind of, especially with women that you don't know, to talk about your jobs, etc. So yeah, it was a really, really memorable thing to sometimes just take that out of the equation and say, let's walk together quietly.
But I think it's a good thing about walking is that sometimes you can just be here and walk, but sometimes you can just start to walk a little bit slower and take a little space to be alone with oneself. It depends on the way we want to the direction we want the walk to take. I feel that in Women Walking the City at Night, it is made for us to do community, and so silence can appear, and it usually appears as late at night, but for me it is not a important, like it won't be an obligation.
Thank you so much to both of you. That's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Any other questions or sharings?
And Mary is, oh, there's a lot of message.
Yeah, let's have a look. Darkness. Melanie's group was the one that went in the woods during your last walk, I think. Oh yeah, the path that I walked was associated with sex work, and it reminded me of Matthew Beaumont's night walking, and how walking at night was often illegal. Yes, because it was associated with crime, vagrancy, or prostitution. Night and darkness makes walking seem illicit. but I used to go on Reclaim the Night as a student, and we walked through the red light district of Sydney, King's Cross, and the workers would wave to us from their windows. It was quite moving. Yeah, I mean, the night walking was, as a term, as I said, it kind of shifted from male vagrancy, male criminality to women, and had primarily a sort of sexual sense, to the extent that night walker is elided with sex work by the 18th century, I think. Are there any practical measures that you have been undertaking in your neighbourhoods that have enhanced your feeling of safety while walking? Oh yeah, and I agree, Anna. Yeah, so let's have a look at the neighbourhoods and walking safety. Has anyone got anything to share on that?
Sorry, and on neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Yeah, but first I want to go back. Just Melanie, it's true you did a walking in the woods, but also in Catalonia there was also a walking in the woods. So there were 2 or 3 last year in the woods, and going to the measure that have been undertaken.
I mean, no, is my response to that, is that I even had a meeting with Bristol City Council recently about pedestrianisation was the topic, and it was astounding how little gender figured in any of their thinking, not just about walking but about transport. So we have these councils who want us to engage in green travel and think it's sustainable, it meets public health imperatives. We're told by the NHS to go for 2 10-minute brisk walks a day in the UK, but there's the gender never appears in the conversation, and until it does, women are not going to have access. That's the thing, like, it improves everything for everyone if we make it possible for women to access walking freely and safely. It makes them healthier, it's better for the environment, but it just doesn't seem to be part of the conversation. Hopefully, at least in Bristol, that's really what I want to do, is try and make people think about it without me having to go gender every 5 minutes. How about you, Eleonore? Are there any safety?
Yes, like for me, it's very interesting because I can see the difference between France and Spain. And the difference is very, very big. It is important because of the safety in the streets in general. I feel Spain is very safe in general, safer than France. But it is also into the political action. So I think I'm almost sure that in all projects in Spain there is a part for gender, and I feel we can feel it. But even though as Andrew is asking, it reminded me directly of a very recent experience of mine. Because just very near from my house, I am not in the center of the city. I'm not in the center. And there were, during 10 years, they were making constructions. And so there was a wall for us not to be able to see the construction. And it was a feeling of unsafety when there were nothing different. It was just a feeling. And they took out the wall and everything is very different now. But comparing to France, I can feel that now in France, it is starting to be a topic. So it is a trending topic that is being that is helping you to have the subvention, to have the money, but then making it into the practice is way, it's another it will take time.
Lovely. Lots of women having to leave because of children, which is absolutely fair enough. It's that time of the night. I wonder if we could finish on Andrew's question, Anna's question, which really interested me too, Eleonore, which is it art?
I can't see the question, but is it art? I feel that everything that we do is even talking is political. So starting from there, when we are making a proposal based on the poetical action of walking in no direction, so only looking and going ahead through the moon, for me, I understand it in a artistic way. But as I said, for me, making art is political. So then the path, between the distinction between one and the other, I can understand that some person could say it is not art. But for me, I can feel that art is talking about poetry, about senses, about community. And this is what I am trying to do, and what we are trying to do when we are doing Night Walk.
I think very similarly, and I also think that if you perform things slightly differently, if you repeat things slightly differently, then it becomes performance, because you're imagining a different way of inhabiting the world, or a different way of seeing things. I suppose it's that difference between performativity and performance that's worth drilling away at in this, especially with walking, which seems so natural, and yet is so culturally maintained. Have we got any other questions anyone wants to ask before we wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes? No, in which case I will let you get back to your children if you have them, or cats, or whatever you need to take care of. I've both to take care of. Thank you so much, Eleonore. That was fascinating. I've so enjoyed talking to you, and I can't wait to do the Harvest Moon Walk in October. Otherwise, shall I hand back to you, Andrew?
Yeah, if that's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, a big thank you to both of you. I mean, you know, I think it's a little bit of what Claire was saying. It's the broken record coming round and round again. I mean, you know, I'm trained as an urban designer. I've worked in active travel as well, and it is phenomenal, the fact that we the sort of kind of stuff that we were implementing in the 90s disappeared somewhere, you know, in the intervening 30 years, and we're sort of coming back to start talking about them again. And you think, you know, what we were talking about were really simple, practical things, like, for example, lighting ground floor premises, you know, which is a really simple thing to do. But it's frustrating. It's very frustrating. I think what Eleonore has achieved so far is fantastic, and we're really hoping that we can help grow her action, because I think it has huge value. And Ellie, yeah, we're going to have a conversation about Bristol, having lived there. Anyway, that aside, thanks to both of you for putting this together, and thanks for everybody for coming along. There are a couple of things we need to say. First off is that because of Eleanor's action will take place on the 6th and 7th of October. So a week after that action takes place, Eleonore is going to chair an event. We're going to host it for her it's not going to be video recorded. There are going to be no men involved. So Mary, if Mary has gone already, but maybe Mary or Anne Marie will ask them to host it on behalf of Eleonore, and that she can run that event as she wishes. But obviously it's to try to let participants who've taken part in the action on the Harvest Moon to talk freely about what they've encountered and experienced. So that's happening on the 14th of October. Obviously, there'll be more details of that in the future. So, but once again, thanks very much for a really interesting conversation and discussion, and thanks to everyone who's come along.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the interest, the big help, and the rich conversation that everything generates. Thank you very much. And I hope we will see us walking by night.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Cheerio.
Good evening.